Alright, in this video we're going to focus on the act as user feature, and there's some documentation that I want to review and a couple of different settings that we need to change to move ourselves along to our ultimate goal. To start with, I want to go into the Proton administration section of the documentation, and this section here called act as user. So this is just to point out what it is that we're actually going to do. And you'll know that we've already done some notes.ini updates for the different odd Proton settings that are necessary. So here are two more. Proton act as user, allowed values are 0 and 1, indicating whether this feature is available. 0 is not enabled. So we need to put in Proton underscore act as user equals 1. And then Proton underscore IAM client underscore config underscore name. This is from the previous video where we created that setting called C3UG. We need to put this into the notes.ini. So I'll let you do some reading here. Let's jump over to our notes server and go into the notes.ini file and do some editing. So we're logged in as notes here. We're in the home folder, so we just need to go local notes data, and we can do vi notes.ini. Of course, the Domino server is running right now, but we will make these changes and then restart the Domino server. So I'm in insert mode. I've gone down to the bottom here, and we're going to add a couple of new ones. So Proton underscore act as user equals 1, and Proton underscore IAM client underscore config underscore name equals, and in my case I called it C3UG, so this will be whatever you called it when we went through the configuration in the previous video. And that's it. So press escape and then :WQ, and we'll come back and make sure that we restart Domino before we continue. Let's jump out of here and back to the documentation, because there's a couple more things that I want to point out. So the next thing that we want to talk about is what's the code that we're going to do for this example. And this is now going to depart from the code that we had been writing previously. As it turns out, we're going to pull in a section that we had previously written, but we're actually going to take one of the examples that comes from the HCL AppDev Pack. So down here there's this client library section. I just clicked on IAM, so we're under IAM overview. If you click on client library, this is some example code that they've supplied, and it gives us a very good illustration of what it is that we want to try and do. So I'll let you read this section. The authorization code flow is what we want to play with. So it says if your Node.js application wants to access Domino resources on behalf of a user, it's appropriate to use OAuth 2.0 authorization code flow. So the typical case is your application wants to use OAuth to obtain the user's permission to access the user's calendar. Okay, we're not going to do this access the user's calendar piece. That's that DS API business that we said we weren't going to do. But it does follow exactly the same pattern here. So click on examples, and this is the one that we're actually going to do, authorization code flow. So these are the prerequisites. Server-side application setup, we're going to do that in just a quick moment. And then we need to do some editing to the code itself. This is the server-side application setup. We'll get there in a moment, as I said. When it runs, this is what the screen looks like that you log into, and this is what the output result is going to look like. Now, not very exciting, a whole bunch of good old Times New Roman old school business, but it's going to give us the output that we're looking for, and it's going to confirm that we're actually getting an access token and getting the values passed back that we're looking for. And we're actually going to create some documents. So we'll come back to this. I just wanted to point this out and let you do a little bit of advanced reading. Okay, one other thing to point out then, over on the API section of the documentation under DominoDB security, this is where we're going to talk about credentials and our the functional ID. So if you remember several videos back, I was railing about the use of the term functional ID. Here's a good example. It says, let's say that the certificate maps to a functional ID named yada yada. Let's be clear. This is the application functional ID, not the IAM functional ID. So see secure network request for details on credentials. Okay, important to understand that this so right here, credentials.client certificate identifies your application to Proton. So in our case, this is app1/C3UG. Okay, So let's say the certificate maps to a functional ID named app1.c3/c3ug. By default, all Proton requests execute as app1/c3ug, referred to the ACL, and are limited by the database ACL permissions for that ID. You may need to modify the database's ACL before you can use Domino DB to access that database. When using client certificate authentication, you can choose whether to execute Proton requests as your functional ID, app1, or as a different user. In our case, that's what we want to do. So this is the kind of the cool part here. It says, let's say you've acquired an access token stored in user access token, and we just need to add that to the bulk read documents or bulk write documents. We're actually going to do exactly this in the code. And what I really wanted to point out is this last piece here. That user must have at least reader access. So this is now the app1, and we need to add the act as user role. That's the bottom line. This is what I wanted to get to here. So we're kind of ping-ponging back and forth here a little bit, but it's all going to make sense in the end. The bottom line is the next step is that we need to go into the NSF and we need to change the ACL so that our app1 user has the act as user role. So let's grab our Notes client into our video here, and we're going to go to the Node API demo and right click and say application access control. So way back when we set this up and we've been testing as app1 specifically, there is no role called act as user, so that's what we need to do here. We need to go into roles and we need to add _act as user. Okay, and that gets added in. And then we go app1 and we say you have act as user. So we can still control person and author. They get create, but now they get act as user. So this is what's going to give us our combination with IAM to say who's allowed to do what. We will be adding the app2 user a little bit later, but for now I'm just going to leave it there. So, okay, that's the key thing that I wanted to be able to cover off in all of this. So let's take a quick pause here. We'll come back and do another little housekeeping step before we flip over to the code. So I will see you in the next video.